What's up? How's it going? This is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Appreciate that you're choosing to listen. Thank you. I'm wondering about you, whoever you are that's listening. Sometimes when I sit down to do this and I hit the record button, it's almost like there's this flash in my head of like all these different scenarios where someone might be with this in their ear. Like maybe some of you are in a car driving, or you're in your kitchen, maybe you're at the gym or on a subway with headphones in. I don't know. I'm sure there's so many different places and scenarios that are taking place while someone might be listening to this. And I just love the idea that we're hanging out, whoever you are, and me, and that it feels that way. I mean, that's my hope, that it feels that way. And some of you have said that to me in your emails recently, that you feel like you're in on some broader conversation about yoga, which is exactly what I'm hoping for. One, that there's a broader conversation happening. And I think some of you have expressed like you feel like it's happening here in New York in a way that it's not happening where you're from. And I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of yoga teachers, but as I was talking with Sam Chase, even though there's a lot of yoga teachers in a lot of yoga centers, doesn't always really mean that there's this feeling of community or this like broader conversation going on. In fact, it sometimes can feel kind of lonely. Not any different than those yoga teachers out there who've been reaching out to me and expressing that. So I love that the podcast might be a way where we all get to feel like we're in on some kind of conversation and that there's a conversation happening. So thank you for listening. Thank you for reaching out. Thanks to those of you who posted a review and some stars on iTunes. And a special thanks to those of you who don't only send me the note, but also decide to reach into your pocket and send me a donation. It kind of blows me away every time someone does that, and it means a lot. I do have doubts sometimes, and it is a fair amount of work to do the podcast, but it is absolutely a labor of love, and that love is greatly fueled by your communications. So if you're inspired to do any of those things, thank you so much. And I'm happy for you to be in on my talk today with Eddie Stern, which is a big one because he was on my initial list. When I decided to do this podcast, I started out with an initial list, which was not very big, maybe like a dozen names of people who I really wanted to talk to. Certain people who I didn't know very well, Eddie being one of them, and I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. You see, just after the Leslie Kaminoff episode posted, I happened to run into Eddie at a live event, which doesn't happen. It happens like every couple of years or something even. And I thought there might be a chance he would have listened to it, so I felt a little bit emboldened to ask to his face if he would come on the podcast. And of course he humored me and said yes, said email me, we'll figure it out. I waited a couple of days, I tried to play it cool, and I emailed him, and I never heard back. And then the following week, I emailed him again just to follow up, and I didn't hear back, at which point I let go of it. I didn't want to pester the guy, you know. And then a lot of time passes. I mean, like 7 months, maybe more. And out of nowhere, I get an email from him. He happens to be in India. I guess he's on a trip there. In fact, he mentions it in our talk. And I don't know if he just came upon the email or if he happened to listen to the podcast. I have no idea. He didn't tell me, but he said he'd be interested to come on. Did I still want to do it? Took me about 3 seconds to email him back. Yes. And we made it happen. I got to go hang out with him at his new place, the Brooklyn Yoga Club, which we talk about. And I definitely feel like we get to be in on a conversation with him. So happy to share that with you today. Before I do, I feel like I do want to give a little bit of a check-in because some of you have specifically been reaching out to me and expressing that you really appreciate that I share things and am sort of letting there be some transparency about myself as a teacher, that it's helpful to you to feel like you don't have to portray this image of perfection, which doesn't exist. So those of you who've been listening for a long time might remember in the past I spoke about some pain issues I had, and I spoke about screen addiction. Well, I kind of had a moment today where I had to admit to myself that I'd let those things slide a little bit. First of all, some pain came out again out of nowhere. My neck, I was like, what? I've made all these changes. Why would this pain be coming about? But the reality is I haven't really taken the rest I need. You see, I made time, but I filled that time. What I fill that time with is good stuff. It's basically parenting, so my wife can have more time to do things that she needs to do, which is what I wanted, for her to have more time. But it's at odds with me needing just time to have downtime and be reflective and rest, which is what I need. But I can't ask for that from my wife. Sacrifices way too much and does all the cleaning around the apartment. I know she's pissed about it. And so I can't be like, oh, sorry, sweetie, I need you to look after the kids for longer so I can have reflective time. That's not going to fly. And those of you who've been listening know I've been talking a lot about maybe moving from Brooklyn. Like, some of you sent me some places and we've been looking at them. Unfortunately, the couple of places that we looked at, I don't know, we soured, like they had crappy school districts and there's like all these downsides, and we envisioned a scenario where things weren't going to be better for us. And then we're like, well, maybe we should move to Ridgewood. So in any case, I think my pain is kind of communicating to me once again that I need to be aware of something. And then today I had like another moment which made me think of the screen stuff, because I was on my way to teach my class and I checked my phone on my email, which is so ridiculous because my walk from my apartment to my yoga center is like a 1.5-minute walk. And I have internet connections at both of them. So the idea that I was like checking my internet on my phone in between is ridiculous. But I was doing it, I'm ashamed to admit. And then I'm looking down at my phone and I happen to look up, and the street I'm on, it's kind of dark because the trees are overgrown and they've blocked the street lights. And there's maybe like 6 or 7 people walking on either side of the street in either direction. And they're all on phones. And we're all illuminated by these screens in our hands in the dark. And I went, oh my, what the? It was this like dystopian moment. It like hit me like, oh my God, what's happened? And I guess I've also been listening to this podcast, which I really recommend, called Team Human. It's Douglas Rushkoff has a podcast. Now, I don't know if you guys know him, but he's a very interesting writer, writes about what's happening with the internet and ways that we might use those technologies to be more connected. You know, that the illusion of connected on the internet is often more of a value extraction than it's providing us. So in any case, I had this moment and I thought, oh crap, man, you've just let your whole screen thing go. You have not been clear on that. And I took that in. I went to my class and we practiced, and it became clear, and this is really what I wanted to get to, is that I wrote an article this month, and it had to do with the way practice evolves over time for somebody and integrates into who they are, and the role of physical practice in that, and how sometimes when someone only goes to group yoga classes, they don't get a clear communication about how that might be. So for me, what the doing of the breathing and moving exercises does is provide me some facility in myself so that I'm able to be listening in that moment and catch it, that this thing that I need to do with myself that I maybe was doing and then let slide, like I caught it, and now I do feel like I can address it. I have that pattern in me, and I'm able to exercise that pattern. And the physical practice is about serving my ability to do that. So I don't know. I don't know if that clarifies anything. I had a bit of pushback from the article. I wasn't suggesting that you shouldn't ever do more vigorous practice in your latter years or anything like that. But I do want us to be honest about what our personal practice is as teachers and find ways of teaching classes that are true to that. So I'm hoping that whoever you are out there, whatever you're doing while you're listening to this, that you're managing to keep on your stuff, and if you've slid a bit as I might have, then maybe that you catch before it gets too far also. And let me say, in that regard, if you have any interest, I do have these yoga videos that I put out. And in honor of the occasion today, since we have one of the initial list people on, we're running a promotion there. So if you go to jbrownyogavideo.com and enter promo code Eddie15, you can get a 15% discount on the DVD and downloads, and the Gentle is a new advanced online course. That's jbrownyogavideo.com, promo code Eddie15. All right, my friends, what else? Anything else? Nah, I think that's fine. Let's just go ahead and talk to Eddie Stern.
Check, check.
1, 2, 1, 2.
What is it? Microphone check. 1, 2. What is it?
Here we are. Wow. What a great place this is.
Thank you.
How long you guys been here?
We've been here for a year now. We opened up in January.
And you live here?
We live here.
I know. I'm coming in and you got dinner to cook.
Yeah, correct.
And how many people would you say you'd be cooking for dinner tonight?
8 people.
8 people.
Yeah,
and
actually a little more, maybe 10.
And that is your family and people who live here or work here?
No, it's the teachers and the front desking cleaning girls and some of the family members of the teachers.
And so the teachers eat dinner together?
We do, exactly. We eat dinner together about once a month, and we practice together usually once a week, but we're going to decrease that a little in the fall to probably twice a month.
And did that happen at the old space too, or is that just here?
It's just been happening here.
Wow, so you upgraded.
Yeah, we've upgraded.
In terms of what happens here, that's cool.
Yeah, totally. It's great being out here.
Oh, I know I was here a little bit early, and I didn't want to show up too early, so I was sort of standing outside. I was remarking to myself that I used to study with Allison West, which was right across the street from the Broome Street place. And so there was many times I'd be standing outside there, and I was comparing the difference to how it feels to be standing out here outside on the corner of Vanderbilt and Willoughby compared to Broome Street right off of Broadway.
Yeah, this is way more chill.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's cool, man. They got their own beautiful spot here.
Did you see the school downstairs already?
I took a glimpse in, and I was like hanging out in the back area over there. You guys really got a good thing here.
Thanks. We have a bed and breakfast on the floor above us, and then we live up on the top.
And do you rent or do you own?
We rent.
Oh, no.
You know what? My landlord from Broome Street, after he sold that building, which precipitated us moving out, he bought this one. And then he said, hey, I got a building in Brooklyn. You should come check it out. I think it'd be great for you. So now we moved here, and we weren't going to take the whole building originally. We were just going to take the downstairs for the yoga school. And then floor by floor, we kind of thought, So now I have the same landlord as I've had for the past 15 years.
So that's kind of crazy. He was kind of a jerk and threw you out, but then gave you another new place?
No, he wasn't a jerk at all. He
business.
didn't throw us out. When that building was being sold, he tried to bring us in on it. And he was great with us. And we couldn't raise the money in the end.
Oh, because it was just too expensive there.
It went up higher than we expected it to be, and I needed to take on some investors, and one of them dropped out the day before we were supposed to have all our stuff into the bank. So, no, he's been awesome. And anyway, he knows my craziness, so it was like once we came out here, he knew exactly what to expect.
That's kind of nice because, I've had a landlord for about 8.5 years now. We get along real well. And you'd like to think that there's a relationship there, but sometimes it's just business in the end, you know? So, well, the other thing I wanted to say is just thanks for sitting down with me because, the podcast has been this incredibly fun project where I get to sit down with people like yourself who came before me, particularly in the New York yoga scene, because that's kind of where I cut my teeth. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a little bit of like a history lesson for me and a lot of other people who listen. And you've come up on the podcast before. When last we heard of you, you were making T-shirts off of Avenue B while Leslie Kaminoff was going in to teach yoga classes.
Correct.
And I did a little bit of sort of research on you and, read a little bit about how you grew up in the city. And I noted that, because when I first got to New York, one of the things I remember is going to Bleecker Bob's.
Yeah, I worked there.
I know. I read that. I was like, oh my God, he worked at Bleecker Bob's. And then you met Moby, I read, on off of 9th and A at this bar.
Yeah, the Aztec Lounge.
And I remember when I got to the Lower East Side or whatever, it was in the 90s and Tompkins Square Park still hadn't been redone. Like it was still kind of like a tent city. And it was sketch. Like we wouldn't go over there. We were worried. Mm-hmm. But I remember that's like the New York I think of in my most romantic sense.
Right.
And you grew up in that. Like I came to that in my college years, but that was like your high school years.
That was all my years. I mean, I grew up on McDougal Street. I lived a 5-minute, 7-minute walk from CBGB's, like your T-shirt right there. I spent every weekend from the time I was 15 or so at CBGB's. It's the Sunday hardcore matinees.
Wow. I went to one or two. I played there once.
What band?
I see. That's something we have in common. I know you were in a band, and your band was called Chop Shop.
Yeah, I was in Chop Shop.
See, my band was called Dim Sum Clip Job.
No, never heard of you guys.
We had one album out from John Zorn producing a Bond label album for us.
Well, John and Zorn and I played very briefly in a band together called God is My Co-Pilot.
You were in God is My Co-Pilot?
I was in the early stages of God is My Co-Pilot because Craig Flanagan and I worked together at Bleecker Bob's, and Sharon, his ex-wife, was a good friend of mine, and I played tabla and Jew's harp in God is My Co-Pilot.
Wow, I saw them, but I don't know.
And the only show I played in with John was at ABC No Rio.
Wow. That's cool. I was in that little downtown music scene for a little while because the drummer in my band, Laura Cromwell, was good friends with Zorn. And we were using some of his hand signals and head nods from the Cobra stuff that he did. We were real into kind of semi-improv. Some things were planned, and then you could throw up a hand signal and everybody would jump on.
Awesome. He won't remember me.
But that's awesome because that's in New York, I remember, but it's not like that in those areas anymore.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's way safer.
It's true. It's safer, but I don't know. Some things were sacrificed maybe, huh?
No, that's just how we see it.
Yeah. That's our nostalgia.
That's how we see it. As Tim Miller says, the older we get, the better we were. And every age suffers from that. We were just in Mysore for a month. And I haven't spent a month there since Guruji died in 2009. I've been there a few times, but I haven't spent a whole month. And I was with my wife and my daughter. My daughter's 16. And we were amazed at how easy it is to live there now. In the 1990s, 1980s, it was like India was so hard. Just to do go to the post office was an all-day affair. Making a phone call took forever. And the simplest things were exhausting. But now it's there's Wi-Fi. We were in a house that had a washing machine, so we didn't have to spend 2 hours a day hand beating our clothes in the bathroom. And things are way easier, not just for the Westerners, but for the Indians too. And I thought it was great. I wasn't walking around going, "Oh man, you guys have it so easy," because we had to struggle.
I long for the older days. Huh?
I didn't, man. I was like, "This is great. I love having a washing machine."
Yeah,
and having Wi-Fi, and all those things make it just easier to do the thing that you're trying to do. Does it make you less creative? Very possibly. Is there less creativity in New York now that everything is rich and white for the most part? Yeah, I think very possibly.
Well, I'm up against it a little bit even in Williamsburg now, because when I moved there, I left the Lower East Side to go to Williamsburg because that's where all my artist friends were going.
Yeah.
Because where the rents are cheaper, it was all artist-inspired businesses and bodegas. Now they got La Quinta and Starbucks around the corner.
I don't know what La Quinta is, but I've heard of Starbucks.
It's a hotel chain. So, that does change the makeup of things. Like the people people who built the center with me can't afford to live in that neighborhood anymore.
Yeah. That's how it goes. That's how the Lower East Side is. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
One day I won't be able to afford this block either.
Well, I guess we embrace the impermanence of things.
Yeah.
Well,
I just want to say one other thing.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's my influence or not, but, my daughter now, who's 16, is listening to great music. She's heavily into the Misfits, into the Clash. Red Hot Chili Peppers is her favorite band.
Huh.
She has a taste in music which I would have appreciated at her age completely. She doesn't listen to any of the tripe which is out there available, and I'm so happy.
but was that always the case? Because I got a 6-year-old daughter right now who she loves that pop music and it's terrible, but she's so cute while she's listening to it. It's hard not to enjoy. But I've been giving her music lessons, and she's learning to play drums to AC/DC. So amazing. I'm trying to round it out.
Yeah, I don't know. She latched on to the Beatles at a really young age, and and oddly enough, the White Album was her favorite album when she was 6 or 7 years old, which is a very strange album to like. That was one of the weirder Beatles albums.
Yeah.
She used to listen to it incessantly, and she used to comment, I don't know how people can listen to music from this century. That's what she was saying in 2006.
To your punk rock heart, right?
I thought, oh my God, this is great. And was this influence mine or not? So, even so, people latch on to rawness quite often. They don't always go for the polish. And so I don't think that time and place dictate for everyone what the mentality needs to be. And that's one of the things that was the defining characteristic of the yogis also thousands of years ago, that whatever was polished back then and whatever was fanciful back then, they didn't go for it. They said, forget it, I'm going off to the forest because this is not bringing me happiness and it's not permanent, and plus, it's not creative. So I'm out of here. And so the yogis, I think, had a direct line to the punk rockers, and I think they had a direct line to the beatboxers and to the whole hip-hop movement and to a lot of the stuff that we find. It's that same current of thought which says, I am going to express my creativity and I'm not just going to give in to what the status quo is, because the status quo is too limiting. I'm going to see what else there is out there.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Those music genres are dear to me too. I wouldn't have made it through college without Fugazi,
Oh, yeah.
And so to me, what that music did for me is absolutely connected to what yoga does for me.
I wouldn't have made it through high school without Minor Threat.
But, I connect those things as well. Yeah.
The first time someone thought to spin a turntable in the opposite direction and make a different sound is comparable to me to the first time someone thought to themselves, I'm not going to think this same pattern of thinking again and again. I'm going to stop this pattern and I'm going to reverse it. Scratching is like pratipaksha bhavana practically. It's just like going backwards in on that same thought process and turning it into something else.
Nice.
So
nice. That's very cool. I like the yoga of turntable.
Yeah.
So tell me then, how do you get from being a hardcore kid to getting to yoga? When do you go to yoga first?
Well, I first did yoga when I was 15, and I only had about 2 weeks of classes.
And where was that?
At summer camp.
Summer camp.
And and I've told the story before that, at the end when we did the final relaxation, I went to a deep place of absolute disappeared, nothingness, like everybody does. It's why everyone loved doing yoga in the first place. They're like, I just can't wait to do Shavasana. I can't wait to relax at the end. And what would happen was I would wake up when the teacher would tell us to wake up. And I thought that the teacher knew a special way of bringing us out from this state of nothingness. And so I wanted to keep doing yoga when I went home, but I was scared to do it because I thought, what happens if I do this relaxation thing at the end and I don't wake up and and no one knows how to wake me up? What if my parents come find me lying on my back in my room and they don't know what I am or where I am, and how to get me out of it? So I didn't do any more. But it always sort of stuck in my mind. And then at Bleecker Bob's, I met a guy named Ted Bajorek. He was working in the comic book section. I was working in the T-shirt section. And he started telling me about vegetarian diet. And he started talking a little bit about yoga. But his whole thing was that he had met Amrit Desai in the 1970s and had Shaktipat from him.
I see.
And had an enlightenment experience, according to him, that went on for days, months. And so yoga to him was fully about enlightenment. It was only about Kundalini. It was only about
transmission.
Totally. And which is what yoga was for a lot of people, everyone, in fact, during those times. So all the inspiration from Ram Dass and from all those early, pioneers, it was only about enlightenment. It wasn't about having a really fit body or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we would start talking a lot about, he gave me books, and we'd talk about enlightenment, and we would talk about what we would do if we ever got enlightened. What would we do if we raised our Kundalini? Well, we'd probably start a band. These were the conversations. They were ecstasy-fueled conversations.
But
and
that's
tequila.
nice. Thanks for the full disclosure. But I once heard if the Buddha was here, he'd be the bass player for the Strokes or something like that.
Oh, God, I hope not, because the Strokes suck.
You don't like the Strokes?
No, please.
Oh, all right. Well, let's leave that. But I get what you're saying.
No offense to the Strokes, but you guys suck.
All right. Also duly noted.
I don't know who said that, but they picked the wrong band. I could see maybe King Crimson.
Okay. I gotcha. Fair enough.
Anyway, so this
was about enlightenment, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of, I've often said this, that when I first came to yoga, I put it differently, that it was about going inwards and having inner harmony or something. You were saying it was more about enlightenment.
That was the terminology. I mean, we were reading Yoga Sutras and Osho, and he was still Bhagwan Rajneesh then.
I see.
So he was still Rajneesh, and I liked his writings back then a lot.
I had the Orange Book or something. He had this one book that I got a lot out of. It was before I even knew anything about him.
Yeah, and so that's what we were reading, and that's what we were talking about. And it was through macrobiotics. I have the book up here on my shelf, Michio Kushi's The Macrobiotic Way. And he had 6 different yoga poses in there, 8 different yoga poses you could do for maintaining good health and harmony and inner harmony. Because primarily the yoga stuff was conversation and some meditation practice and eating vegetarian diet. It was no postures or anything like that. So I didn't start doing any postures until I got this macrobiotic book. And that's when I was 18. And so I started doing those exercises, and they hurt like anybody's business. It was like sitting in virasana after spending several years in a mosh pit is not a recipe for happiness.
No one told you to use a little bit of padding or nothing?
I'm telling you, There's no bolsters in the mosh pit.
No, not at all.
And so and then later on, I went and took a yoga class. I took Dharma Mitra's class, and I took, when it was Jivamukti Yoga Society on Avenue B. And
that was at the very, very first incarnation.
They opened in 1987 on Avenue B, and I started going there about 2 or 3 months after they opened.
And were you practicing with Sharon and David?
That's the only people who taught there. Their class is 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday.
Yeah.
And I went to my first class with a girl that I was seeing at the time, and I thought to myself, they're doing sun salutations and standing on their head, and I thought this has absolutely nothing to do with yoga.
Huh.
That was my first impression, this has nothing to do with yoga whatsoever.
And
And then,
But you kept going to classes even though?
Because there was no other access. I was like, well, where else am I going to find something which is called yoga?
Right.
So I went to them, and I went to Ravi Singh, and I went to Dharma.
Yeah.
And that was, and I felt Ravi was the closest to being something that was like
pointing
yoga.
towards that enlightenment idea.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then for some reason, and then Sharon and David suggested I go take the teacher training in Kerala at Shivananda. Because originally Jivamukti was Shivananda Yoga.
Uh-huh.
They couldn't call it that, but they were straight up Shivananda.
That was like their early influence.
Yeah, that's what they did. For a bunch of years, that's all it was. So I went, took the teacher training, and then after that, I was basically like doing the Shivananda Yoga thing.
Yeah.
So then I wasn't going to Ravi anymore. But I felt that was really, he was a little bit more into the esoteric.
And did the training in any way make it more about yoga for you?
Yeah, the training was great. Swami Shankar, who's now Robert Moses, who's my publishing partner at Namarupa, taught the course. And we did asanas and pranayama twice a day. There were lectures every day. There was meditation and chanting every day. I was really into the chanting. And I felt like, okay, this is real sadhana. It's a real... there was... and you were in India... And there's the whole holy atmosphere behind everything that you do there. And the air is soft, and you're in the jungle, and you're practicing on the the yoga floors that are just laid with cow dung, and it's really like you feel like you're doing sadhana.
Yeah.
And it was great. I think that was a super transformative month, and it definitely helped to change the direction I was going in, for sure.
Sounds like it gave context for that physical posture work.
Yeah, I don't know. Even the asanas that were being done in at Shivananda, it was still I was just trying to do the asanas well, So I don't, and that was just something you did. You just had to do them. And I'm a little bit lazy by nature, so I only did them because I had to do them.
I see.
But
you had to do them because you felt it was important for your spiritual development.
No, you had to go to all the classes.
Oh, you just had to by requisite.
Yeah, you had to go to all the classes. And my body was supple back then. I was loose, and I could do a lot of the poses. Not all of them, but I could do a lot of them. And so that was sort of the access point.
I see.
But I thought the chanting was better.
You like the chanting better?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to come off like sounding like, comparing everything. I already said that the strokes suck. The chanting was better, so...
But that's what you remember. You liked the chanting.
I did. I remember it. We used to chant in the temple, Om Namo Narayanaya, for half an hour every night. And only a few people did it. And that was like, I wasn't going to miss that. It was hard to do because you would get bored after a while. But by the end, it was like you're really just lost in the sound. And the chanting in the morning and in the evening for the kirtan was really like, it was really beautiful. I loved it.
So you were in it for that aspect.
I liked chanting primarily from the beginning. In fact, when I went to... how did I get into the chanting? With Ravi Singh, actually, because they do a lot of chanting in the Kundalini Yoga.
Oh yeah, I remember singing for 30 minutes that Kundalini class.
And I did. In fact, I just remember what it was. His teacher came from Boston to do a weekend-long immersion, and I took it. I didn't know what it was, but I signed up and I took it. And so we did, I guess, probably 8 hours or 10 hours of sadhana a day over 3 days. And I was 18. It was in the summer, my 18th summer, I guess they would call it. And I was still going out, and I was still doing drugs.
Yeah.
And quite often, I was coming home at like 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning, I might have been 19 at this point, actually. And after this weekend... his teacher said, okay, if you want to keep up the energy from this weekend, just do these mantras for 41 days. And one of them you did for 31 minutes, and the other 2 you did for 11 minutes. And I didn't know what energy had been built up over those 3 days. I had no idea. But the next morning after that, those 3 days, I woke up at 5 in the morning wide awake. And I thought, how's this possible? I've never woken up this early. This is usually when I come home. And because I was running my own business, I was out of school, I was free. So I woke up and I thought, okay, I took a shower and I just did the mantras. And then I did them every day for 41 days. And that's what I really got into. And I don't remember all that much about the postures. But however, when I met Patabhi Jois in 91, and I met him in 90, I started practicing with him in 91 in India. The first day when he was talking us through the sun salutations and some of the standing poses, I felt to myself that it was the first time I was really doing yoga, that he had pulled all these different parts together, like the posture and the breathing and the drishti, and it all felt consolidated to me. Mm-hmm. And that first month I was with him, I felt, this is really yoga, that it all just came together in like one consolidated point. And I felt that I understood what I was doing at that point and what I should be working on. And so that was just after, 4 years or so. Mm-hmm. So I did the Shivananda and Kundalini and all that stuff for a couple of years. And when I was traveling in India, every city I went to, we would look for yoga teachers. If I was alone or with friends, we just, I'm sure you did the same.
I did, yeah.
You just,
a lot of frauds. I ran into a lot of frauds.
there's and it wasn't easy to find yoga teachers there. Now they're everywhere, So yeah, that really is where. And then after that, I didn't have an interest in doing any other type of yoga. That was it for me.
Interesting. Well, when I hear you say that, it makes me think of a time where I still had one foot in the rock and roll world and one foot in the yoga world. And I remember when it started to become at odds, where you play a show like Wednesday night until late, and then you got to get up and teach a class early the next morning. And at a certain point, it just felt like, oh, this yoga thing is taking me in such a better direction. And it seems like when it all came together for you, when you met Patabhi Jois, was that when it became clear that was the direction you were going? Because you mentioned you were still partying previously.
But that was years earlier. That was like 1988, 89.
I see. So you transitioned out of your party life before you met Patabhi Jois?
Oh, yeah. I quit doing everything when I was 19.
I see.
And I knew that after that weekend with Ravi Singh's teacher, then I knew for sure that all the things that I was getting towards with psychedelics or with mushrooms or anything, that I could find those same inner experiences through yoga. And I could do it without feeling terrible the next morning, or without having any chemical residue in me, or without needing any outside, artificial support, is how I thought of it. So I stopped doing everything. I stopped taking drugs. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. I was smoking a lot, like 2 packs a day. And I quit that a little bit earlier. And so by the time I met Guruji, I was definitely straight edge, full on.
And you mentioned that you met him before you practiced with him. How did that happen?
I was in Mysore, and I was there attending lectures on Vedanta by Swami Dayananda. And I met a guy who asked me what I was doing in India, and I said I'd come to try to learn yoga. And he asked if I had met Patabhi Jois, and I said no. Who is he?
You just got introduced to him at a party.
Pretty much. Actually, the guy was an elderly gentleman. He's in his 70s or 80s, and he was either owned or was working in a communist bookstore that was right next to the place where the philosophy lectures were being held. And I was just killing some time because I was early for the lecture.
Wow.
And he said, oh, you should meet him. So he gave me his address, and I went to meet him the next day. And he said that I couldn't study with him because I wasn't going to be in Mysore for long enough, because I was only there for another day.
I see.
A week had finished already. And he gave me his card and said, you come back next year. If you want to, write me a letter. So I did.
That was the seed.
That was it.
Serendipity.
Totally.
And so what was the thought when you decided I want to go there and study with him?
Oh, I came back to New York, and I was still teaching at Jivamukti. They'd moved to 2nd Avenue.
So you were teaching at 2nd Avenue?
I taught at 2nd Avenue, yeah.
Because I got there 94. I think you were already gone.
I was gone.
Yeah.
I was there from when they opened until 91 when I left.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So, okay, so you were teaching at Jivamukti, and then you're like, I got to go study with Patabhi Jois?
Yeah. My experience was not a happy experience there. And I needed
why?
to leave.
Why was it not a happy? You just didn't enjoy the teaching?
There was a lot of, complicated interpersonal relationships, and I didn't have faith in the in what was being taught, and I philosophically didn't like some of the things that I saw that were going on, and Sharon and David were friends of mine, and while I respected them, I couldn't follow along with the direction they were going in. Specifically, the idea that they were going to be creating, this thing that they were going to start calling the Jivamukti Yoga method. And, I didn't believe that people could just decide that they want to create their own yoga style. That wasn't, it didn't resonate with me. So I felt it's better that I go off and rediscover what yoga means for me. And that led me back to Patabhi Jois. I hadn't planned on going to study with him, but it led me to go back to India, which was my fourth trip over to India. And I was just going to go do sadhana somewhere. I had an idea of a place I wanted to stay in the forest for a few months. But I ended up in Mysore and stayed.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you there for that first visit?
Well, the first visit is going back to a question you just asked me. I came back to New York after I met Patabhi Jois. I was still teaching at Jivamukti. I was telling Sharon and David about all the people I'd met. And I said, I met this guy one day, Patabhi Jois. They said, we've heard about him. We want to study with him. And I said, I have his address. I can write him and we can go.
I got the connect. I got the digits.
So I sent him a letter and asked if we could come, and he said yes. So we all went together the next year.
Oh, they went with you on that trip?
Yeah.
I see.
So the first time I studied with him, we all practiced together. In the afternoon, he taught us for...
So even after you weren't so down with the direction
No,
you were going, that was before?
I left at the end of that year. That was before. That was 1990.
I see.
And then we went in 1991. And this was going to be terribly boring for your listeners. We went in 1991 in January, and then I left Jivamukti in December of that same year, towards the end of the year.
I don't think it's boring. It's interesting to hear the early formations of what have now become conventions. It's like when your kids never heard of the band or whatever.
Yeah.
But so that time when you spent with him that first year, it seems to me that really is the formative time that established your Ashtanga practice.
Well, we stayed 1 month,
Okay.
and we traveled quite a bit. I think we were in India for 3 or 3.5 months. And we did a month of practice with him. And after that month, when I got back to New York, I didn't do it again for the rest of the year. I did it a couple times. I still just did all the, hybrid practices I was doing.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I know that when I came to Jivamukti, there was a lot of Ashtanga influence in those classes. It was a real mix. There was Shivananda for sure. There was Ashtanga in there. And then there was even a Iyengar getting thrown in there as
for
well.
sure.
But it was a real mix, and there was quite a bit of Ashtanga influence. Did that happen after they went to that month? Or was there Ashtanga influence in the classes before you guys? Obviously not. You wouldn't have known that sequence yet even.
No, the Ashtanga Yoga influence came later. Not after that first year, but probably after David made a second trip to India and after Guruji came to Jivamukti in 1993 and taught there. No, we left Mysore that first trip really bad-mouthing Guruji. I mean...
what do you mean?
We did not think... See, you got to imagine, like, all the people who were practicing in Mysore were, like, normal, like, folks. Half of them were hippies and half of them were just normal folks doing yoga. And they dressed normally and they ate normal food and they were, like, normal people. And Sharon, David, and I show up... dressed completely in white, in dhotis, except for Sharon, who's wearing saris. All of us have, like, tattoos of snakes. And in fact, they called us the snake people.
You were the crazy freaks from the East Village.
We were the crazy freaks from God knows where. And we walked around in our dhotis and our saris, thinking like we were holier than everyone, including Patabhi Jois.
Wow.
And that in his classes there was no chanting.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.